Well, I think that there are a number of specific legal questions there that would have to be answered. And if you were in a trial setting, clearly, I think you would have a lot more attention to detail. I think it's fair to say that Democrats aren't necessarily covering this off quite as well as they should be in terms of, not calling witnesses, for example. But I think the point that would broadly be made here, if you were looking at it from the perspective of somebody who does favor impeachment and who does think that incitement occurred, is that ultimately you had this whole ramp up and you had a whole series of statements and a whole series of things that the president was doing that pushed people over the edge on January 6th, and that his speech that occurred on January 6th, and then in addition, his failure to do things as the riot was playing out and as he was hearing about that, frankly, from phone calls with senators, right? I mean, we heard last night about this phone call that he had with Tommy Tuberville, where Tommy Tuberville literally was saying they've just escorted the vice president into a safe bunker, essentially. Ramp up, and it's not just one specific statement that the president made. It's a whole series of statements over a period of time. But I certainly agree that Democrats aren't handling this as well as I would like them to be, given what I feel that I saw and given what the rest of the country saw as a ramp up. Right. I think they could be doing a much better job of this in terms of prosecuting the case, but that's not necessarily their priority.
Steve, let's jump in.
To this point, though, are you saying that these statements, meaning the president's statements, I assume what you mean are the president's statements conveying his significant skepticism regarding the November 3rd vote, are you saying that those statements are not allowed, that we should somehow be criminalizing, or that it is impeachable for him to voice what he and tens of millions of Americans believe?
No, and I think that frankly, I think it's interesting that you're trying to move the ball here. I think it's interesting that you're trying to move the ball here by conflating what is legitimate First Amendment covered speech with something that is not First Amendment covered speech. Incitement is not First Amendment covered speech. And what you're talking about and what you're trying to point to here and deflect by pointing to here is actually very different to the point that I'm making and to the point that people who do favor impeachment here are making.
Steve, your response?
Well, I just want to jump in and say,
I'm not deflecting at all.
Hold on. Hang on, Amir.
You're actually trying to take something specific that we're talking about and suggest that you're talking about something wholly different, that it actually protects speech.
Liz, let me clear the deck here. Steve, you have the floor.
What statements are you talking about from President Trump that are impeachable? What statements?
I think if you're looking at things like, you had the comments about go there, get wild, fight harder, everything to do with fight and needing to fight much harder when you had people.
Kidding me? Every political.
No, I'm not kidding you.
If we're going to go based on that premise.
Hang on a second. Panel, hang on. We can only have one person talk at a time. Hey, Liz, hold on.
Terms like fight.
Statements like that.
Kristen, hold on one sec. Kristen, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Every politician nearly has made statements like that. Take back our country.
No, not in that context.
Hold on, Liz.
We
let you. Liz, hold on one sec. Kristen, go ahead.
Politicians accountable. If this is the new standard, then was Bernie Sanders responsible for the crazed loon who went and shot up Republicans, including?
Actually, Republicans have argued he was. Plenty of conservatives have. And on this exact channel, just on Tuesday, we were talking about the odiousness of Maxine Waters' statements and how she should be held accountable for that. So actually, yes, I think you are applying a double standard here. Yes.
You're going down a very dangerous path if we're going to say that the new standard is that, any politician cannot say, fight for your country, take your country back.
That's not the standard.
This kind of language.
Again, you're taking specific things he said and twisting them and saying that that's not what he said. You're moving the ball.
But here's something fascinating.
Specific things that the president said that you believe qualify as incitement. You haven't said one thing.
I actually have said several things. You've just glossed over them, and I think people would be well served by going and Googling this. There was a whole PolitiFact piece on this that I think people should go and look at. There have been a number of pieces that have been done that have laid out very specifically everything that was said, everything that was tweeted in the run-up to January 6th. I'm sorry you're not familiar with that, but those of us who are watching it on the day and in the days in the run-up to January 6th are extremely familiar with it. And ultimately, the Senate's going to have to make a call on this. Impeachment is a political act. This is not a criminal trial. I would prefer it as if the Democrats were conducting it as a criminal trial, but they're not. And the fact of the matter is that what you're trying to do is excuse things that are frankly.
Liz, let me cut you off for a second. Liz, let me just cut you off for a second. I want to make sure we get everybody's voice in here. The point that Kristen was making is that Republicans, yes, they did cite Democrats. They didn't move to censure. They didn't move to impeach Bernie Sanders, even though there's precedent for something like that. But let's be honest, a crazed Bernie Sanders supporter almost killed Steve Scalise and everybody else that was at that Capitol baseball practice. That's a fact. Let's be honest. Rand Paul, also a doctor, just like Dr. Joe Biden.
My former client.
A neighbor went down to his house and beat him up after being incited by rhetoric from the left. Okay, the point that Kristen was making is that we didn't take it to impeachment. And I think what's scary not just for the 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump, but the 80 million people that voted for Joe Biden as well, is that the bar is now so darn low for impeachment that in 4 years, if we've got a Republican in the White House or a Republican-controlled House and Senate, we are just going to spend the rest of our lives careening from impeachment to impeachment, and that should scare everyone.
Well, there's a risk of that because of how politicized the process has become, but that doesn't have anything to do with this specific impeachment. I would say that was fairer with regard to the first impeachment. No, I don't think actually it's true that for the eternity now, we're going to have a situation in American politics where we have presidents who are going and giving speeches to people who are really riled up and ready to perpetrate violence and ready to attack police with flagpoles and things of that nature and encourage them to do that. I think it's ridiculous to think that that would become a norm in American society. And if it is what people think, that should really cause us to reflect a lot on where we are as a nation and how we got to this place. But no, I don't think that Republicans have ever argued that what Bernie Sanders did was okay or what people did in inciting the attacker who went after Rand Paul was okay. But the difference is the people who did that weren't president. They hadn't been president at any point when they were doing it. Therefore, we wouldn't be talking about impeachment naturally.
Liz, we've got to take a break. The panel is coming right back after the break so we can continue this conversation. By the way, the reflection, I know it started for me during the protests that we saw for 6 months of 2020 that the left largely didn't acknowledge because they wanted to make